Ciao guys, Cullen Gandy here and welcome to my channel where I talk about business, specifically my misadventures in business and trying to make money coming from an industry where money wasn't really the main driver of my life, really. I came from the opera industry or the arts industry where most of the focus is really on just creating a really beautiful craft, something that people can appreciate and something that will fulfill you mentally and spiritually as you're doing it. But I found out that what I also really like and what I also super find spiritually and mentally helpful is when I can afford to buy food and pay rent, which as an opera singer wasn't always a thing that I was able to do. So today I kind of want to talk about a job that I kind of fell into while I was in the in-between gig kind of mode, looking for the next thing that could put food into my mouth, living in the most expensive city in the world, and often living kind of like a subhuman being. And I know a lot of my friends and a lot of you guys know what I'm talking about. By the way, if you enjoy these types of videos that have to do with finance, investing, and little short stories about different misadventures in sales, go ahead and just shoot me a like and subscribe, and also hit that notification bell so that I can keep giving you more content like this. It helps immensely, and I can't thank you enough. So the year was no, it wasn't. So the year was 2018, and I was just finishing up one of the seasons with the Metropolitan Opera where I was singing as a part-time chorister, just sort of making ends meet and being happy to get paid while I was doing music. But, you know, living in New York, it gets kind of expensive. Where I was living at the very tip top of Manhattan, it was $1,100 for a room in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I was glad to have it. I mean, you guys who know me, you know what I'm talking about. Living in New York as an artist, it's brutal. But I had made some inroads with some other friends on the island of Manhattan who sort of gave me connections for work now and then. I know a lot of my friends were doing catering. Every now and again, I would get the odd request to do some sales and sales consulting and sort of get a little bit of supplemental income going for myself. So that's kind of how I ended up with this job as a salesperson with Errand Square. It's a company that offers legal representation to passengers who are delayed more than 3 hours going to or from Europe. You see, if that's the case and the fault lies on the airline in question, then by law, no matter where you're from, you're actually supposed to be entitled to 600 euro. And, you know, that's not a thing that a lot of people know about. So I believe that it would help a lot of people out just having that information, regardless of whether or not I was going to get paid to do it. It turns out that a big part of this job was actually going into the airport, which, you know, right in the line of legality there, soliciting people at the airport. But I would go into the airport having bought a business class ticket, and I would often just fly with the passengers who were delayed this way. And I did this probably hundreds of times over a couple of years. I would fly with these delayed passengers, sell each one of them who were sitting around waiting, sometimes 3, 4, 5, but other times, you know, 8 to 12 hours delayed by these airlines. In fact, the worst airline by far for these delays was always Norwegian Airlines. So if you're going on Norwegian Airlines, just heads up, might get some delays, and maybe I'll see you in the future. Suffice it to say, I would find myself at these international airports into the late evening and often the early morning hours, selling people that were none too pleased with the fact they were sitting around for a 5 p.m. flight that was now leaving at sometimes 5 a.m. Now, I will go into greater detail as to what I did for this business and how I actually ended up making this business almost 10 times the revenue in the course of a year, having sales developed it. But for the purposes of this video, I just want to go into the events of this kind of insane night that I had with these people on this flight to Paris. At least I believe it was Paris. To be honest, some of these experiences kind of blend together in my mind like one big trip, and I can't really distinguish from one to the other sometimes, especially when you're sleep deprived. Quite often, things can get kind of weird, kind of fast, and you have company. But on this night, it was especially hectic. If you can imagine JFK, those of you that have been there, there were at least 5 or 6 delayed flights just with Norwegian. And that's the company that usually I was doing business against or with, or however you want to think about it. Well, the whole airport was just one big line that sort of diverged at different areas and different places for people that were just constantly pissed off about their delayed flights. And often these flights that were delayed back and forth from Europe would compound their delays to become giant monster delays. So people would be even more angry when they would see that sometimes these flights would get canceled as well. So then you would try to get a hotel or something like that, and often Norwegian was not very amenable to the idea of buying folks hotels. If I had to guess, there had to have at least been 15 or 16,000 people in the airport in this one terminal of JFK, just waiting around. I'm sure it wasn't that many, but it felt like that many. We were crammed like sardines. You could have measured my distance from the security of the terminal in like halves of a kilometer, because that's how far we were from actually getting to the terminal in these lines with these delays. So by the time that we all get into the terminal, we're all packed in like sardines, and I try to parse out who's what and where. Sometimes I'm aiming at two different flights. At this evening, I think it was Amsterdam flight and the one going to France, right? I'm trying to parse through sometimes 10,000 people trying to find this very select group of maybe 600 folks on flights to sell them the idea that their delay is actually worth $600 to them. And for the low price of 30% off of money that you didn't even know you were owed, I could help you get that 600 euro. That seems like a pretty sweet deal, and so a lot of people would be into it. And that's the first rule for any sales job, by the way. You want to find a product that people actually just really want to buy, because then half of the battle is already over for selling. I was talking to people all night. I started there, I think at 8 p.m. and it went on and it went on and it went into 3 a.m. I believe. In fact, I was talking to this one lady and she was like a diplomat's daughter, and she was telling me about all of her travails across, Europe and all of those things. It's really interesting the kind of people that you meet there, because you wouldn't really meet those kind of people just sitting around at home or circling around your own group of friends. So I'm actually pretty thankful that I had this job for that reason too. Anyway, so when you're selling this many people and people are drunk at the airport and it's 5 a.m., sometimes you divulge information personally that you probably shouldn't divulge. And I must have let it slip that I was an opera singer at some point, because they had asked me to sing a French song in the terminal of the airport. So I did my best, and I sang a French art song actually that I have on my other channel called A Clarice, and truth be told, people clapped. I know that is a total cliche, but if you're among those people that were there that night, maybe you can help back me up, or if you can verify some of the other events of that night, maybe you can help lend some truth to this story. Comment below if you think this really happened or not. Now, things are bad. Things are bad-ish, and people are drunk, people are ready to get on the flight, and all of a sudden, throughout the night, the terminal of the airport slowly empties out until you realize that the only flight that's left, the only people that are there are the ones that are actually on your delayed flight, which one is really great because then you know who to talk to, and you don't have to worry about sifting through a bunch of people who are giving you weird looks. And two, you get to breathe and go somewhere and be quiet for a little bit if your mind is just a little bit blown by the whole situation. I would say we had only 2 other flights there with us. So we still had about 1,000 or 2,000 people in the terminal at the time, when all of a sudden over the loudspeaker, the security say, actually everybody has to leave now. Everybody has to go back out through the terminal exit and then re-enter through security. And I'm like, what? And all of a sudden everybody else is just like losing their minds. Because I mean, the French people were drinking wine. They were getting wasted. Right? So you have these like zombie-like Frenchies just like stumbling out of the exit, just like cursing God and everything. And everybody's like, what is going on? Like, why would they have us exit outside of the terminal? Well, later on, it turns out I found out that somebody had actually grabbed the gun of one of the police officers inside the airport terminal and then like fired off a couple rounds into the ceiling. And they had to I don't remember if they actually shot him or if they just tackled him. Or maybe some of you guys can actually verify that this happened and let me know in the comments below, because I actually don't know the full story. So that's why everybody had to exit, right? I mean, everything turned out right, but at the time, everybody was kind of like moaning and bitching that, you know, they were going to have to go through security again, right? So I guess that's very French and American, I guess. Cue another hour and a half-ish wait in line to go back through security so that they can confirm that none of the rest of us are like some secret terrorists that are trying to steal the police's guns. So we get back through security. At this point, it's almost a ghost town except for 2 or 3 other flights that are with us in the terminal, and we board the flight. And so I actually flew on this flight. Now, sometimes I would take the business class ticket and just cancel it and get a refund and then go back home. But this night I was feeling ambitious, wanted to do the return flight. I knew that if I did the return flight home, I would make bank, because oftentimes when I did these flights, I would make $1 or $2 grand in a night if I did one flight. You know, so if I sold 100 people, I'd get 20 bucks a person, which was like awesome, right? As an opera singer, that's unheard of. I mean, $2 grand in a night, that for a lot of people is unheard of. So once I get onto the flight, I get into my seat, I strap in, I'm ready to just turn the world off and fly directly to Paris and sort of do my thing when I get there. And as soon as the doors close, I realized that I hadn't even planned to take that flight that night. It didn't even occur to me that I was going to take that flight. And I hadn't taken any other articles of clothing that I could change into. So by the time that I got to, I think it was Charles de Gaulle, I was smelling real weird, because I had started this journey, like this flight job that I had done had started at 8 p.m. and I had arrived to Paris because we left the airport eventually on this delayed flight at like 8 a.m. almost, like 7 a.m. that morning, and it was a 9-hour flight to Paris. So by the time I got to Paris, it was like almost 21 hours of continued movement and talking to people and eating and smells and beer smell, because like sometimes they like drop and like spill beer on you while you're talking, which is, you know, fantastic. So by the time that I got back to Charles de Gaulle, I realized that A, I didn't have any other clothes, B, I kind of smelled like BO. So what happened was I get to Charles de Gaulle and the flight coming back is also going to be delayed. So it's a direct sort of fly in, fly out from Paris kind of situation. So I get to Charles de Gaulle and I have to start selling people immediately. And usually I like change a shirt or put on deodorant or whatever it is. Didn't have any of that. So I went back through security, didn't have any change of clothes or anything, no deodorant, and I started, you know, pitching people, you know, because they were delayed. And I noticed that I started to get more dirty looks than usual. Usually I'm received like okay, because I got that like can-do gumption. But it turns out it was because I smelled probably very heavily of BO and stale beer. So that's probably why it was. So much so to that effect that usually the flight attendants who actually check people into the flight were notified of my presence, which, you know, never happens because A, flight attendants don't care if you're doing something weird in the airport, and B, they're not paid enough to really care, and C, oftentimes with Norwegian, they weren't even Norwegian employees. They would like hire out like independent contractors to do that job. So I had 2 flight attendants come up to me and they're like, why are you talking to everybody? Why are you bothering people? And what are you doing here? Like, we've seen that you're just sort of going around talking to everybody and kneeling down. You're making people uncomfortable. And is this something that we have to call security about? And I was like, no, it's fine. No, totally. But I'm like delirious. I'm smelling weird. I've been up like full day at this point, so I don't even know what's going on. So I just end up sitting in the corner. I sold probably 10 more people, which totally isn't worth my time. I think it's like 200 bucks, which, you know, not too shabby. And I fly back home for a 36-hour European like romp through all of the emotions of life. That is my story, and that is just one of the stories that have occurred during this particular job that I had with Air Square, which I will go more and more in depth about the actual logistics of what I did with Air Square, how I did it, and what kind of a cool job that was. So stay tuned for more videos about that. I hope you guys enjoyed that short story time I did about that really crazy kind of Wild Westy sales job that I did in New York. And if you did, please remember, leave that like, leave that subscribe button smashed, I guess. I smash it, whatever. And hit the notification bell so I can tell you more about my misadventures in business. And hopefully I will see you on the other side.